Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. We're continuing our holiday celebration with a little gift. For myself. I'm gonna take a bit of a break from writing about the whole Yu-Gi-Oh shtick and dabble in another card game, as I am like to do from time to time. But it's also got a bit of that winter flavor to it. I think it has a lot to do with being marinated in soft drink commercials growing up, but bears have always felt like they belong as part of the Christmas landscape. So now, we're gonna take some time and talk about a few. Specifically, the first, and currently only archetype in Elestrals. Well, kinda. You know how every type introduced in Yu-Gi-Oh since Psychic has all felt like they are just archetypes, instead of just being part of the game's building blocks? Well, we've got something similar right here. In a game full of dragons, hell beasts, and even animated testaments to the elements of the world itself, it's time to align with the Ursine. Get ready, cause it's time for Bears Explained. Today's episode isn't sponsored by Elestrals, but I do have a shop code for them. If you're looking to get your hands on cards, accessories, or these wonderful plushies this holiday season, it would mean a lot to me if you'd consider using my code to help the channel out. So, what's the deal with bears? Well, they're a series of fire or frost Elestrals that are either itty bitty babies that only need one spirit, or some of the largest bodies in the game, requiring 3 spirits. Oh yeah, if any of that is going over your head right now, I don't blame you. That's why I made a how to play Elestrals video that goes over basically everything, especially if you come from a Yu-Gi-Oh background. So if you know nothing about the game or need a quick refresher, that's a good place to start. Anyway, in terms of their game plan, it's all about getting as many of them onto the field as possible, with effects that either get more bears onto the board, or that benefit from having multiple bears. But like we touched on previously, the effects won't name bear cards that you get to summon out of the deck. Rather, we'll be looking for their type, or as they're called in Elestrals, their subclasses. You'll notice that the text boxes have these symbols in them, which denote that the effect works on any Elestral of the Ursa subclass. So we basically want cards that can put the right bear into our hand at the right time, keep our bears safe, and give them room to run rampant over our opponent. Let's start with the fire half of the theme. Scout is a 1-spirit Elestral with 1 attack and 3 defense, and when this Scout is destroyed in battle, you can special cast a 1-spirit Ursa Elestral from your hand or deck. Yep, this can turn into any of our little dudes, regardless of their element. And with 1 attack, it's easy to crash this into an opposing Elestral to tutor out one that you need. And if it's early enough in the game, your opponent may not even have an Elestral big enough to cause you to take damage while doing this. Though keep in mind that you are spending a spirit to cast this card, and spending a spirit on the Elestral you bring out via the effect, so it's not like you get away scot-free. And while effect removal is becoming more and more of a premium, remember that this only triggers when destroyed by battle. So an errant Kindleo, or even some kind of suppression effect, is going to keep this card locked down. Though, honestly, I'm going to keep it a bit locked down myself until it learns a bit more about how to do its job. Scouts usually come back to base to report on their findings, not explode as part of the mission. Seer is a 1-spirit Elestral with 3 attack and 1 defense, and when this Seer destroys an Elestral in battle, you can special cast a 1-spirit Ursa Elestral from your hand or deck. Now this is where things start to get a little aggro, as we are the complete opposite of Scout. The card Viscerus sees a ton of play because of how much pressure it applies to the opponent by turning 1 battles into more field advantage, and Seer is doing that for an entire subclass. It can even cast an attack position so you can keep hitting your opponent. The problem is, unfortunately, the stat line. Among the 1-cost Elestrals, even single points in their stats can make a huge difference in their playability. Viscerus gets away with what it does because it is, effectively, a 5-attack Elestral, being in the highest bracket of power among the 1-costs. Seer, on the other hand, only has 3, meaning it's going to need some support to get over meaningful targets. Support that it will eventually get, but certainly won't be very useful on its own until then. For now, it's better to keep your Seer to the ground to hear about any new support coming up. Smog is a 1-cost Elestral with 2 attack and 3 defense, and you can expend a Fire Spirit to special cast a 1-spirit Ursa Elestral from your hand. This can help to add bodies to your field, which is another example of an effect that does little on its own, but has a wealth of utility. In an even board state, having more Elestrals than your opponent means you have more bodies to pressure them with, and the more likely that some will survive a turn cycle so you can ascend an Elestral if need be. Sadly though, only having 3 defense doesn't exactly make it a defensive powerhouse, and because this is an activated effect, you won't be able to use this more than once per turn, so unless you draw a fistful of Ursamogs, don't expect to flood your field to help with your ascensions later on. That being said, it's only a matter of time before new waves of Ursa Elestrals make this effect even better, and I'd argue we have a card that combos well with it right now. But if you want to make the most of this, you're gonna have to attempt to confuse your opponent and make them play suboptimally. And that's where Ursamog's smoke and mirror tactics come in. Mage Ursa is a 3-cost Elestral with 12 attack and defense. It gains 2 more attack for each other Ursa Elestral on your field, and your 1-cost Ursa Elestrals can't be attacked or targeted by your opponent's card effects. This is the big mama bear of the theme, doing all she can to keep her little cubs safe. And look, the fur pattern on her head looks like a big crown! This can help avert attacks away from Ursamog as it tries to get more monsters onto the field, while Ursier gets time to pump itself up before beating up an opponent. And the targeting protection is all around fantastic, until you see that it only works on one Spirit Elestrals. Diverting your opponent's Earthquake is a lot less cool when you realize they were probably going to spend it on removing your big 3-cost Elestral anyway. It's another example of why big costed creatures here aren't exactly in vogue. You can invest a ton of resources into it only to get sniped by a single Invoke Rune. Mage Ursa may be set up to deal a lot of damage since it has 3 whole spirits with it, but its effect just isn't impactful enough on its own, and even with other Ursa, it isn't that impressive. 12 attack is already outclassing just about everything in the game. Being 14 or 16 isn't really going to change much. Honestly, I think Mama Bear is just trying to show off for the kids. Alright, that covers our fires, now it's time for the frost. Abomin Ursa is a 1-cost Ursa Elestral with 3 attack and 1 defense, and gains 2 attack for each other Ursa Elestral on your field. They've basically shaved that attack boost effect from Mage Ursa and gave it to this card, and really helped solidify this as a theme that wants to see you commit as many bears to the field as possible. It's a great pair with Ursamog because if you summon it first, using its effect can put Abomin Ursa onto the board, giving it that much desired 5 attack stat. It's also not a bad cast off of Ursier for a similar reason. Now, at the current state of the game, this is pretty vulnerable. You need to have a bedrock of bears to make this stand toe-to-toe with other threats. But to establish this, the only cards we have to do that in Archetype is Ursamog and Ursier. But as the game gets faster, as the laws of power creep demand, Abomin Ursa won't just be a mainstay of this strategy, but the game at large, taking over board states that aren't able to manage a tsunami to turn this to its more vulnerable defensive state. And from that point, you're also going to need a number of Elestrals equal to the amount of Abomin Ursas they have to actually run over them, and if that field consists of 3 Abomin Ursas and a Mage Ursa, not even Tsunami answers this, because now you can only attack the 12 defense Mama Bear. This card certainly has room to grow, even if it is a bit of a late bloomer. But if it didn't have a hibernation period, well then it wouldn't be very bear-like now, would it? Urskode is a 1-cost Ursa Elestral with 2 attack and 3 defense, and when attacked during the damage step, you can return the attacking Elestral to its owner's hand, and you can do this even if this card is destroyed by the attack. This is an interesting defensive option. It doesn't really do much to help with bears in general, and reads more like a standalone card. But it does force your opponent to commit at least a 4 attack Elestral to the bounce effect to get this off the board, setting them back a turn in that department if they don't use a rune to bypass Urskode. It's also technically searchable by our next card, so it's a tutorable blocker, not to mention that if your opponent is trying to get over some smaller bears to weaken Abomin Ursa, this both provides a boost to that monster and puts your opponent in a bad spot when trying to make a push. I just kind of wish it forced attacks to go at it. Heck, with Mage Ursa on board, this is actually kind of a non-bow. We want this thing to get attacked, so, you know, let it out there. You could say it's the bear that I'm most cool on. Elestral's merchandise team, make the Urskode sweater right now, please. It's ugly sweater season. I need that Big Dipper fleece now. Ursicle is a 1-cost Ursa Elestral with 1 attack and 3 defense that, when normal cast, lets you search your deck for an Ursa Elestral or rune and adds it to your hand. That's right, this game's spells and traps also have monster types, ain't that neat? This is essentially the most important card in our deck, tutoring up everything in our roster, and effectively being the card that makes this a proper proper archetype. Honestly, I just wish I had more to say about it. This card is so self-evidently good, there really isn't any other commentary I could give. Aside from this scaling in power, the more sets we get with Ursa cards in them. I mean, we're going to be taking a bit of a break in Moonrise, but I'm sure that's only a temporary break, right? Right? Glaciursa is a 3-cost Ursa Elestral with 14 attack and 4 defense that deals piercing damage. And when this Glaciursa enters battle with an Elestral, you can suppress that Elestral. So like with Specterus, if this fights something, it turns it into a vanilla, letting you punch through Elestrals that would otherwise have native protection or some kind of retaliatory effect. And you're always getting infer damage. Like with Yu-Gi-Oh!, piercing allows you to deal damage through defense position Elestrals to keep the pressure on. Though remember, using that 14 attack to get through a 3 defense body does not result in 11 expend from your opponent. We're still checking the difference between the Elestral's enchanting spirits. Though if you are hitting a 1-spirit Elestral, getting in for 2 is still more damage than most creatures can do by themselves, so it's a major mover. But it's still not a major improvement over Mage Ursa. It's still a big 3-cost dude with a flashy effect, but no protection. It loses to basically every counter rune in the game, and because it's only rocking a 4 defense, it's even susceptible to position changing effects, unlike Mage Ursa. And while Abominursa may one day benefit from Mage Ursa's attack protection effect, because of Glaciursa's cost, it never will. This has the potential to be a real showstopper, but Elestrals has to exit its GOAT format days before it can do so. And I hope that day comes soon. This creature has a giant icicle for an arm that it's going to punch you with. How are you not going bonkers over this? Alright, that does it for our Elestrals. Now we have a couple of runes to go over. And the first one is pretty unique. The first Stadium rune that isn't a carbon copy field spell that boosts a particular spirit. Ursa Den is a 2-cost Stadium rune, needing 1 fire and 1 frost. All Ursa Elestrals gain +1 attack and defense, and when a player casts an Ursa Elestral, you can enchant a generic spirit onto this Ursa Den. You can disenchant 4 generic spirits from this Ursa Den in order to special cast an Ursa Elestral from your hand or deck. Okay, so this is rough. I'm compelled to point out that Stadiums are basically Elestral's field spell cards, and we're operating under old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules, where there can only be a single Stadium on the board between both players. Now, most of the time you're losing out on a card and a spirit if your opponent plays one over yours, since all the other Stadiums only cost a single spirit. With Ursa Den, you're missing out on that extra spirit as well. And I'm also not a fan of this boost here. The other Stadiums will generally also give a single point to attack and defense too, but it scales with the amount of spirits that Elestral has. Our 3 costs will gain +3 to each stat, but Ursa Den is only ever a static 1, which is untenable for the kind of aggro that we need for bears to function. And then there's that last effect, which is kind of frustrating. See, you're already starting with 2 spirits by enchanting it. You can even get the other 2 you need pretty quickly by casting Earthsmog and using its effect. But then comes the crash. By disenchanting the 4 spirits from this card, they're just gone. That's 20% of your total life and resources just blinked out of existence. And you're not even done yet. This can cast any Ursa, but what, are you just going to cast an Abominursa to fight alongside your current bears? Urseer to swell up your ranks? No, you want to cheat out something big for all the work you had to do with this, which means you're going to go for one of your 3-cost Ursas. But you're not really cheating them out. You still have to pay the cost for them. So if you use Ursa Den, which is 2 spirits itself, enchant it twice to get to that effect, which is 2 more spirits, plus presumably the 2 spirits you're spending to cast the 2 Elestrals that trigger this charge, plus a 3-cost Ursa from the summon, you are looking at a play that costs you 9 spirits from your spirit deck, almost half of your entire starting life total. And you have to lose the Stadium in the process of doing this, so say goodbye to that +1 attack and defense bonus. I mean, catch me out here making custom cards, I guess, but this would have been infinitely more usable if, instead of disenchanting 4 spirits, you summoned the big Ursa, then nexused all the spirits from the Stadium onto it. That way, you wouldn't have to pay even more spirits, and your big 3-cost would deal even more damage. Like, maybe I'm spoiled here, but my understanding is that when you play an archetype in a game, you're supposed to have specific support that's better than the generic stuff as a trade-off for just playing the generic good stuff. And I'm not gonna deny, pulling this off might feel really cool if you get in for a big hit with Glacier Ursa, but in general, it's just worse than the generic good stuff, and that kind of blows. Now, I am hoping desperately that this card is just laying the groundwork for future bear support. Like, maybe this becomes a really good Nexus bank for bears in the future. Gaining a spirit on it every time you summon an Ursa means that it'll never destroy itself because you're at least grabbing a new spirit every time. That's actually pretty cool. But this is all speculation at this point, so for now, we just have to accept that this Stadium rune isn't going to make a dent in our opponent's plans. But going from probably the worst bear card to the best, we have Don't Poke the Bear, a 1-cost counter rune costing 1 fire spirit you can only cast during the battle phase, giving a target Ursa Elestral +4 attack and defense until the end phase. So yeah, if bears are the first archetype in the game, why should they not also get the first battle trick? True, we've got cards like Tsunami that can mess with battle positions, and sure, Argo can slap on an artifact on an Elestral to make it bigger during combat, but for the cost, it can't be beat. 1 fire spirit turns your dinky little bears into creatures that most 2-cost Elestrals would be scared to run into in a dark alley. And it gets even better when you can turn that temporary attack boost into permanent value. Sure, winning just about any battle in Elestrals nowadays is a huge swing in tempo, but with Ursier getting you another Ursa when it wins in battle, that's an easy way to start a steamroll. And it's a great way to ensure your opponent doesn't attack into your little creatures. Suddenly, any set rune could be a Don't Poke, so now even the opponent's 5s can't attack without fear. And don't forget, this is searchable, and is probably Ursicle's best target. This is kind of like the Hurricane of the Bears deck. Just by existing, you make your opponent afraid to commit to combat without having some kind of way to ward off counter runes. And the psychological aspect alone is worth it. And you warned him! Not your fault Mama Bear is angry now. Alright, so that's all of our bears, but what do we do with them? Well, the name of the game is aggro. We want to see Ursier as quickly as possible and have it slam into your opponent for value. Maybe you summon another Ursier with its effect to take advantage of a weak opposing lineup. Maybe you get a Bomb and Ursa to build up a big body. Either way, you want to find your opponent's weak spot, get in the lead, and don't ever let it go. And if you play Glacier Ursa to close out the game, then hey, who am I to stop you? So what can we play to help them out? Consistency is king, so grabbing the right bear at the right time, or even just having more copies of your best bear, is going to be of paramount concern. And thankfully, we've got 2 really neat options for that. Small Tuga searches you out any 1-cost Fire Elestral, while Narpoon gets you any 1-cost Frost Elestral. And both are just a single water spirit. Small Tuga even comes with a fantastic 5 defense to ward off attackers. But that means running water spirits, which is actually worth the splash, because you'll also want to be running one of the best counter runes in the game anyway, Tsunami, changing the battle position of every non-water enchanted Elestral to defense position when activated. This is used in pretty much everything to blank battle phases, but with how low some defense stats are, this can be the perfect setup for your Ursier sweep. You may also want to run Eddy, as it's a mini Tsunami that you can use to change battle positions, except it can also switch cards from defense to attack, helping to get over some pesky walls. And one such wall is one that you should also be running yourself. Astrabbit. They also have a 5 defense body, and when properly cast, give you essentially another draw, picking the best card out of your top 3. And if there's ever any turn where your spirit action doesn't seem to be at a premium, you can spend it to re-enchant your Astrabbit with another Thunder Spirit to do the effect again. There's also a wealth of generic counter runes in the game that you'll want to be playing, once again irregardless of the deck. Now, if you've been playing the game for a while, you've probably already seen these, but for all the noobs in the audience, Poison Tipped Arrow will debuff the attack of a newly cast Elestral, making it harder for them to swing over your stuff, while also having the option to destroy that Elestral during the end phase. Shield of Achilles is basically compulsory evacuation device, but only on attack declaration, and also if it required you to take a punch to the face from the monster you're trying to bounce. And Gorgon's Gaze is effectively Forbidden Chalice without the attack boost, giving you a way to keep your opponent off important effects. Other staples include invoke runes like Ambrosia to keep your spirit count up, helping you to withstand more attacks and to take more actions. Resting on your laurels as cheap removal if your opponent starts getting too ahead of themselves. And Lavalith because, well, you're already running the fire spirits, and having a big body that deals with a rune is pretty slick. And if you have the room in your spirit deck, Earthquake is a nice piece of unconditional Elestral removal to have in your back pocket. Though since you're also natively in Frost, Cryoblast may also be in your future. A lot of really good Elestrals only have 2 or less defense, so it's also cheap removal, but it can also potentially be used to help you swing over a defense position Elestral that's a bit too beefy. Playing a field spell that's worth the spirits might also be in your cards, especially if you want to help pump up Ursir to clobber more targets, so Volcanic Forge may be worth keeping an eye on, especially if you're still building up your card pool and need to fill out your deck list. This also enables the usage of Stoke the Forge, but I'm not really a fan of all these Invoke runes that require you to have the appropriate Stadium rune in play. They're basically the game's crummiest 2-card combos. Now, I want to take a second and talk about the divines that represent our elements, as they're kind of a big part of the game, but I should preface by saying that these aren't exactly recommended for bears. That's because one of their primary functions is to act as a Nexus bank, but because our deck doesn't really have any Nexus effects, we can't benefit from them in that way. This means it all comes down to what the divines actually do, and sadly, it's not great. Hephaestus can grab any artifact rune in the game out of your deck, which I expect to be a bonkers effect in the future. But right now, most artifact runes are element locked, with the generic ones being more gimmicky than anything else. This does mean we have access to our fire and frost artifacts, but they're not much better. Most of the artifacts give a static boost to your stats, but the hammer gives you +1 attack for each enchanted rune that you control. So if it's just the hammer, you get a +1. If you have a stadium, that's a rune, so that's a +1. And if you still have the Hephaestus on board, well, that's an enchanted rune, so that's another +1. So basically, it takes a lot of investment to make your bears just slightly better. By comparison, Keone has a lot of potential. It gets our 1-cost Frost Elestrals back from the Underworld into our hand, meaning we have more chances to cast Ursicle for more searches. And her specific artifact, the Scepter, gives a decent +2 attack, +1 defense boost. And if Keone is on the board, if the Empowered Elestral runs over another in battle, you get to special cast a 1 Frost Elestral from your hand. Now sadly, Ursicle only triggers if it was normal cast, so there's no synergy with that effect. But you can special cast Abominursa, and it'll be all gravy. Like I said, these are pretty gimmicky without leaning into the Nexus mechanic, but it's there if you want them. Oh, and it does play well with Kindleo too, and that's free removal, which is pretty swanky. Frostyx is similar to Scepter of Keone, where while you can't get the Ursicle search off this, it does help flood your board with Abominursas, and that seems pretty worth it to me, even if you are spending the equivalent of 3 spirits and a discard. As for a silly tech pick, the Cryo Scorch line. Like, we're already in Frost and Fire, we might as well add a little extra bite. The Cryovern is already one heck of a combatant, easily one of the best 2-drop Elestrals in terms of attack and accessibility. You can even do cute things like special cast it with a Water Spirit to avoid tsunamis. And if you can manage to summon the mighty Cryo Scorch, you basically have your fingers on the button of a game over situation. And if you're able to special cast it, a board clear of runes is a straight shot to victory. And that's all I've got to say about bears. While the theme is taking a bit of a break with no new releases in Moonrise, I expect that, with the next core set not needing to focus on particular elements, we'll see some bear representation soon, expanding the options the theme has access to. I'm hoping the most for cards that make Ursaden actually playable, but knowing my luck, they're just going to introduce the Lunar Ursas or something like that. I mean, I know we just got Moonrise spoilers, but I want to know what's going on with the next set right now. I can't bear to wait! But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are bears the next big thing in Elestrals, or are they gonna chill out for a bit? And what kind of bear support are you looking forward to in the future? Let me know down below, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. And I guess also if you love Elestrals, we love all kinds of card games over here at the Orbital platform. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and get 5% off your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Upstairs Media and the Critic of Innocence, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, going it/its for the bit/bits, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Happy Majin, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Marion James E. Picata, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yaminair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Bat Boos, Rank 10 Trains, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vatnia, Animasta, Baron Von Titty Sprinkles, Beelzephyr, Fish, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Caesar M, Chazghost, Dr. Reaper, RIP, Eva Padilla, Gary Lickbread, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru02, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, McSpoofy, Natiel Lee Alexander, Nitromo, Not Al Gore, Nyx, Obsidian, Rainer Leong, Ryan Kairos, Shizuka Nijimura, Sir Knight JCB, Sophie, apparently, Sphilia, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Weasel King of Weaseltown and Zal Dreka, as well as all the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you still need help wrapping your head around this crazy game, I've got a video explaining how Elestrals works right here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.